You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to The Open Door, a show based on the words in Revelation, "I have left an open door before you, which no one can close." This is WCAT Radio's longest-running show, which opened the door to the radio station in October 2016. It's currently offered by Jim Hanink, Mario Ramos Reyes and friends, and remains open to the love of God in its call to build a culture of life and a just social order through the panel's discussion of the Catholic social teaching principles of solidarity, subsidiarity, and economic democracy. The Open Door also explores nonviolence, distributism, and communitarianism. So join us at the Open Door, where you too can be part of the conversation.
Welcome to the Open Door. This week, we're going to tackle some core ethical questions. Our special guest is Elaine Weissman of the Center for the Study of Great Ideas. Joining us in absentia is the late and decidedly great Mortimer Adler. His short and perhaps surprising sermon on the Golden Rule is the context of our discussion. He delivered it in 1991 at Christ Church in Aspen, Colorado. We begin, as always, in prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you will renew the face of the earth. Lord, by the light of the Holy Spirit, you have taught the hearts of your faithful. In the same Spirit, help us to relish what is right and always rejoice in your consolation. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Elaine, I wonder if you couldn't get us started by giving us just a short introduction to what the Center for the Study of Great Ideas is, its connection with Mortimer Adler, and what the Center is doing these days.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to meet with all of you. The Center for the Study of the Great Ideas was started in 1990 with Mortimer Adler as the chairman of the board and my husband as president. Mr. Adler was always his mentor, and so the idea of starting a center in which you could have all of his works that would be sent out to members as journals, so they would be, in a sense, awakening out of their slumbers, which is a quote from one of my husband's essays, because most people, without reading something, and it is still the better art than art or anything else in terms of communication, the reading of a word that you can go over and over and learn something from. And it is, they also send out other articles on other great philosophers who had something to say on the same subject or who may be in contrast to Dr. Adler. For example, the Golden Rule was something that everybody you talk to seems to find solace in, is, well, this is how I run my life. And I can remember when I first read it, and I thought, oh, this sounds good. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, wait a minute, this is very subjective as well. So how do we figure out what the right way to do something is, if this is all we have is in the statement? Well, Mortimer Adler apparently felt the same way, and because I have so many materials of his in the center and archives, when I looked at this essay, I thought this would be a great one to publish for our Tuesday journal. And if anyone wants to find what we have, what we sell, what we talk about, we have a website called thegreatideas.org. You just go there. You can sign up to be a member. You get certain perks with being a member, certain things that Adler permits with being a member as opposed to the public. And you can tune into the things that we're doing. Now, we do everything by selling discs on different things that Dr. Adler had recorded. And some of them were from way back where they would have been, who knows what would have happened to them, but he gave them to my husband to publish. And the other part of it is that we're thinking also of going into electronic because a lot of people like that. So that's all. This has to be reorganized and rethought. So we're going through a period of doing just that. And I really highly recommend that you go there, you read some of these things, because it's great to have great ideas come to your house on every Tuesday. And we do a Philosophy is Everybody's Business, which is a larger publication once a month. And I think you would enjoy it, and it would make you think, because that's the idea, to get us all towards the goal which Aristotle wrote about in Ethics, which is the purpose of life. I hope that covers a lot of it.
Well, it covers a lot, and you're a very productive organization. When you said just now, it makes you think, I thought about Wittgenstein. Adler and Wittgenstein never met, but when Wittgenstein was asked, what's philosophy like? And that's a bit like asking, what is it to think? Wittgenstein said, well, it's like swimming, but underwater. So it takes some effort to swim, and to get to the bottom of things, metaphorically, you have to swim underwater, at least for a while. And that takes some real concentration, and it might even help to have a swimming coach on hand when you first get started, at least. Why don't we, in getting started with Adler's provocative sermon, ask ourselves, just what is the golden rule? One of the things that Adler points out is that very close variations on the golden rule are found in all the world religions. But I wonder if Mario or Christopher would like to give a simple statement of what it is, and then we'll have at it.
Well, it's I think it's fairly, everyone knows it, right? It's often rendered as do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Okay, and it could be put negatively.
Right.
Don't do to other folks what you wouldn't want them to do to you.
Right.
And Mario, what's that in Spanish?
What is the do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Haz a los otros lo que te querrían que los otros te hagan a ti.
Sounds better.
That's well.
This sounds melodic. The only trouble with English is it's too close to German.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But what is, I think, is challenging, or I think is very interesting in this piece, is that Dr. Adler make his case at the beginning by comparing and contrasting the golden rule with the categorical imperative, which in any philosophical mind, if you will, or generally a professor of philosophy will say, well, that's not the case, because one thing is the tradition that comes, the biblical tradition, which perhaps is more in tune with other claims, but not with Kant, the ethic of duty. But here it seems that he's making the case, and it's at the beginning that Kant, famous categorical imperative, is almost as empty, if you will, as the golden rule. And that is very, very interesting, intriguing, at least when you start reading the first couple of paragraphs.
I'd like to say something, and I rarely do, in defense of Kant. Now, Dr. Adler focuses on what we might call the universalizability dimension of the categorical imperative. And one way to express that version is in terms of the maxim of the actor. So suppose that you or I or Christopher or Elaine are thinking about doing something or other. Well, we act on some individual maxim. It might be along the lines of, if my electronic equipment isn't working well enough, I'm going to call Sebastian Mahfoud. He's our producer. That might be the maxim of my action if all of a sudden we get all kinds of static. Now, the principle of universalizability might be stated this way. An act is morally right only if the maxim of its action is universalizable. And to say that something is universalizable in this context would be to say that everybody can act on my maxim and there's not going to be any contradiction. Now, the way Adler presents it is he presents it in terms of a universal law of nature. How would you like it if the whole world ran this way? Well, that's pretty close to the maxim of my action is okay if I could have everyone have that same maxim without some kind of contradiction. Now, that could be taken by itself vacuous. I could have as my maxim something like on Mondays I eat macaroni, and then I might say something like, oh, that's okay because as far as I'm concerned, everybody can eat macaroni on Mondays. Why, I wouldn't mind it if there were a universal law of nature that everybody ate macaroni on Mondays. And somebody might say, what's that got to do with changing the cuisine? What's that got to do with the price of eggs? That's pretty empty, isn't it? And I would certainly agree with that. But Kantians would say, hold your horses. There are two other expressions of the categorical imperative. And one of the expressions is called oftentimes the principle of respect, which is to say the maximum of my action is okay. I'm doing such and such and for such a reason, and that's okay, only if I treat others as ends, E-N-D-S, ends in their own right, and never merely as means. Now, that in many people's minds would be an expression of showing respect, and that looks like it starts to have more content. In fact, John Paul II, in his book on largely on human sexuality, love and responsibility, centers a good deal of his discussion on the principle of respect. Now, there's also a last, and this is very provocative, a last expression of the categorical imperative. It's sometimes called the principle of autonomy, and what it says basically is what I'm doing is okay if I'm truly acting autonomously, and the counter to acting autonomously would be acting heteronomously, and I act heteronomously if the law of my action, nomos, autonomous would be self-legislating. Heteronymous would be following the law of somebody else. So the principle of autonomy says to us, in effect, look here, you're going to be acting properly if you're acting on a law that comes from you, not a law that comes from somebody else. Or even, Kant would say, giving this some emphasis, you're acting heteronymously if you act on a law not based on your own reason, but rather on your own passions. And so Kant would say that theological ethics is mistaken, not so much for its content, but because we're all doing what God's will calls upon us to do, but that's acting heteronymously. Now, this is a long and doubtless unwarranted aside, but it is interesting to me that if you want to defend Kant, you could say, well, look here, the universalizability is one expression of the categorical imperative, but there's also the respect angle, and there's also the autonomy angle. I don't know, maybe I've said too much already and you want to push on, but I just thought in fairness to Kant, we ought to get that on the table. Silence tells me, yes. Let's push on.
When you say Kant, yeah, I always say Chicago is, I'm so used to calling him Kant, but I should call him Kant. It still seems like
people in Chicago. Everybody knows that people in Chicago talk funny. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Well, our A's are, they're strange. Like Colorado. We usually say Colorado. I don't know what you prefer.
Oh, Christopher out there in Ohio, he says tomato.
We do?
You say tomato or tomato? No, I say tomato. Absolutely, yeah.
It depends what part of Ohio you're from. It's either tomato or it's tomato.
Oh,
yeah.
Ohio is
it's worse.
Yeah. How do you say you'd say?
May I say something?
Yes.
Yes. Regarding your observation, Gene, I'm thinking about the term autonomy and thinking about the principle of personalism of Wojtyła, John Paul II. Yes, there is a dichotomy there, autonomy, heteronomy, and he goes on and says, well, it's neither. It is theonomy, which means that life is given. It's a gift. It's not something that I'm doing, and I decide. It's not something that I'm doing because I'm being told. It's something that I'm performing, doing because that corresponds to the being that I was given as a gift. So, having said that, it seems that idea of theonomy implies an anthropology, a view of the human person given to us. Now, if you move to this piece of Mortimer Adler and begin reading it and say, well, here you have the golden rule and you have the categorical imperative. And it seems that they are the same. Both are empty, vacuous. And then he goes on and makes the argument. But then I began, when I was reading that, I was thinking, well, yes and no. They are not the same. Perhaps formally, the judgment, the injunction seems to be the same. But when I say, and I read the scripture and say, do unto others as you would have done unto you, that self that we are talking about imply an anthropology perhaps quite different from the sense of autonomy that Kant is stating. So there is an implicit anthropology in Kant, which is not identical to anthropology of this biblical injunction. And so Kant reached to this point after his critique of pure reason, metaphysics, and so on, and the affirmation of freedom as a fact, and so on. So it seems to me that we, or Dr. Adler here, is leaving aside that there's implicit anthropology in these two assertions. And he looked only on the form. And if that is the case, then yes, you can apply and goes on and make the argument. And it seems that if that's the case, in either direction must be the same, either the golden rule or the categorical imperative. I don't know if I'm on target on that, but that's an impression that I got.
So digging a little bit deeper, we find a whole philosophy of the human person at issue. Christopher,
yes.
What do you say about all of these ruminations of ours?
Well, I think my impression reading the essay was that Adler was speaking rhetorically to unpack what is actually behind it. I don't know if he's, in other words, I think what he's addressing is the fact that a lot of people use the golden rule almost in isolation from everything else. Now, whether they actually do or not, what's in their head is another matter. But it's treated as if it's almost like a moral principle which is sufficient unto itself. And the point of the essay is that it's not sufficient unto itself, is that it presupposes other principles.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. So I look at more like he was dealing in rhetoric here, and in order to draw people deeper into the implications of the golden rule.
But now, Elaine, you've always been suspicious of the golden rule.
Well, I remember when I first heard it and was discussing it a long time ago. I mean, even in high school. I always thought it was too subjective because it presupposes that everybody has the right intention when they go to do something. The minute that they say, well, it all depends on how I'd want to be treated. So then I know I can't make a mistake. But we don't know how you want to be treated to make it a universal. It's too subjective because people think that they do things for the right reasons, and they don't always. And so if they feel that's a safe haven for them in terms of their actions actually can be not true to the situation because they're imposing their own opinion on something which somebody else might not have. You know, you say, well, why did you do that? I wouldn't have done that. Well, wait a minute. If I would do it, you mean you, but I'm doing the right thing. Well, no, you're not. So now it's not universal anymore. So that brings up the question is how do we get it to be something universal? And that's where Adler switches into the cardinal virtues. In other words, something that is actual that you would have to answer to in your own mind before you would do something. And if you had that in the right perspective, we could say it is universal if you use those guides. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So he gets to the cardinal virtues, of courage and temperance and justice, and then prudence, which comes in for the right reason. And some are selfish-directed. I mean, I wouldn't say selfish. They're inner-directed to you as a person, and justice is outer-directed. You're not trying to harm somebody. Because good and evil are the primaries, and then right and wrong. So
can we go back a little bit to a weakness of the golden rule, especially if it's taken all by its lonesome, as it were?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think most people set out to do what's right? Or do you think that's too optimistic? I mean, if most people set out to do what's right, and, well, then they treat other people rightly, and they would like to be treated rightly themselves. But do you think that we do, for the most part, set out to do what's right, at least in our own minds?
Well, in our own minds, but I don't think it really, I'm not sure I would say yes to that.
So a good number of people aren't too interested in doing what's right in the first place.
Well, but they don't think in terms of, they may think they're doing the right thing because the way they've calculated it, it is the right thing. But I don't know how many times you hear people saying, well, so-and-so did that to me. Well, that person, you know, even in the great ideas, there's I think it's Aristotle, all people do that which they think good at the time. So people fool themselves all the time into thinking because they have no criteria by which to measure, which is what he's giving, I think, here, as a criteria to measure whether you are, in fact, doing the right thing, which would be true for everyone.
But let me steer the pot a little bit about
Please
that.
Please do.
But when you read the text there, at least in the copy that I got from Mortimer Adler, says all things whatsoever you would have men do unto you, do you ever so to them. But that is not the complete verse, because then you have, at least in my Bible, for this is the law and the prophets. So it seems that the law and the prophet have given content to that commandment. Already is not vacuous, already have a view of man. So comparing with, in that sense, with the categorical imperative, I think, is a little bit not quite the same. So implicitly, there is a law, of course, the Torah, and you have all the revelation there. You have the original sin, you have the behavior of the people of Israel, you have the commandment, you have Moses. Implicitly, yes, you have that golden rule, but the golden rule has a measure. The measure comes from the prophet and the law. And so that, I think, is my point to be considered. And then I double-check the translation into Spanish is the same. The law and the prophets is there, which is the complete verse. Now, here we don't have these last, the law and the prophets.
No. Well, no, we don't. I don't think this statement is in any way to be religious.
Well,
and, I mean, this would apply to people that aren't religious. And it's just simple. You know, I mean, when we're talking about what we need to make it better, anybody who's not religious could still read it and say, yeah, I have a problem with it too. I just want to understand if you're putting it in the law, meaning, because these are all biblical, you know, references to different religions. Couldn't it still be a topic for someone who has no belief?
Right. But there is one objection to that, I think, is that it is religious if you add the proper verse according to the law of the prophet. That was a revelation to the people of Israel. That was not a revelation to the Hindu people or to others. Then later you can make the case that the revelation was given to all people, then the covenant and all that. But in this particular case, Yes, if you subtract this law on the prophet, seems to be just formal statement you can apply to any other religious tradition, as I agree with you. But I think the content of that injunction in Revelation imply that there is a chosen people at that particular point in history. This is the horizon of this injunction.
Yeah, I think that's true if you take the biblical text. But again, I think what's happening in this essay is it's being abstracted from the biblical text in such a way because it has been abstracted from the biblical text. When people say they live by the golden rule, they're not thinking of the fullness of the text. They're thinking about the particular maxim. Perhaps obviously wrongly taken from its context, but that's sort of the thing they're living by. And when we see it quoted, like we see the quotes here, and I've seen such quotes before where you show different versions of the golden rule, it's always done in isolation from that broader context. So, I mean, if in other cultures we have a similar principle, it's not those cultures that are not actually in relation to the law and the prophets. They're relation obviously to something else. So I think what we need is what Adler is doing is asking, well, ultimately, what is it in relation to? Why should we do this? What's the justification of it outside of particular religious dogma?
We could go secular, at least for the time being, and say that everybody agrees, even though they might not act on it, that we should do the right thing. So we have Spike Lee, right, saying, do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And we would hope that if you follow the golden rule, you'll wind up doing the right thing. But then Adler is saying, well, that leaves us with the question of what counts as the right thing. And I think Elaine might say, Abel might say, I'm doing the right thing, and Baker might say, I'm doing the right thing, and Charlie might say, I'm doing the right thing, and Spike Lee would say, well, whatever it is, do the right thing. So that's not going to take us very far, and Adler says that right and wrong, of course, are at one level, but good and evil are primary. So now where are we going? How do we know what's good and how do we know what's evil?
Well, I think he's talking about in the context of the purpose of life, of having that as the target. So if the purpose of life, according to him, is happiness, then you want to live a life that can get you closer to that by your actions and not go the other way, so that you would have good desires as opposed to bad ones, or that you would not do the wrong thing instead of the right one. But you have to have some criteria which are helping you to live, giving you some support, rather than, what do you think the right thing is here? Well, based on my experience, it's this. But yet somebody comes along and says, but how is that going to move you to having a better life by doing those kind of things? Well, I never thought about a better life. I was just thinking about what I wanted to do in this case. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but doesn't that, citing the term happiness, it doesn't immediately take us out of the subjective, it seems to me. At least right. Many people understand it. What makes me happy is not necessarily going to make you happy. I think that's the basic idea. So I will do those things that make me happy, but that doesn't necessarily have any relation to you.
And that's not the happiness that Adler's talking about.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Right. So,
Yeah, I said that to somebody, and they said, "Oh, would you just laugh all the time?" I said, "What?" I said, "Wouldn't that be nice?" But there are things that you do in life that can turn you, that will eliminate. No, I don't want to say eliminate. Diminishing your ability to get to that place where you have looked at your life and you've examined where you're at and where you're going. The unexamined life is not worth living. I said to Max one time, I said, "All right, I've examined my life and it's not worth living. Now what do I do?" And he looked at me like, "Get out of the room." But I took that step further, But a lot of people live lives and they're miserable, and they have no concept as to why they're miserable. They think it's the little tiny infractions that they incur. But when you think of it as a bigger scale, and what if everybody were doing what I'm doing, it might change your mind as to whether you should do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but even when you cite miserable, right? Because sometimes being virtuous can be very difficult, and actually, in the interim, rather miserable, when one has to fight against one's tendencies the opposite direction. So
yeah, I know what you're. Well, I don't know that any of us are in great danger of being virtuous all the time.
So, just a minute.
Well, there are a few left on the earth, yes, but we don't talk to them.
Let's look at a test case, and it's a test case that Adler would have us look at. It's the parable of the ring of Gyges, and I suppose we could put it in contemporary terms, but I'd have to think a little bit about how to do that. But in classical terms, in Plato's Republic, it goes this way. There's a fellow who, by all external considerations, looks to be living a miserable life. He's a poor, lonely shepherd, and his name is Gyges, poor Gyges. But one day, his ship comes in, as it were. He stumbles across, maybe trying to catch a sheep or two, he stumbles across an old graveyard. And in the old graveyard, there's one splendid coffin. So splendid you could call it a sarcophagus. And, well, Gyges has always been on the quiet side. You got to watch your back, and he'd like to just go by the whole graveyard, but this sarcophagus is something else. He goes over there, and lo and behold, there's a mummy of sorts, and lo and behold, what hasn't been mummified is a spectacular ring on the corpse's finger, and well, Gyges looks around and he figures the sheep won't rat him out to mix species, so he takes the ring, and he's not going to talk about it, but at the annual roundup, jamboree of shepherds where they compare stories and count sheep, he starts fiddling with this ring. And he notices that when he turns the stone in towards himself, it's like he's not there. And he says, "This is interesting." And he does it some more, and when I turn the ring towards myself, I'm not there. And then in the Republic, it says, in Plato's Republic, it says something like, and straight away, he went to the palace of the king and killed the king and took the king's wife as his own. And then we're supposed to be in the story thinking, oh, what a cad, what a bounder. And then Thrasymachus, who's telling the story, and the text says, look here, everybody, fess up. If you had a ring like that, you'd do the same thing, because you would have the best of both worlds. Everybody would think you were doing the right thing, and you'd be doing the wrong thing, and that would be just great. So all this talk about right and wrong is balderdash. Anybody who could do the wrong thing would do it if they thought they could get away with it. And all of that leads, among other things, to social contract theory. And social contract theory says, look, deal is, make sure that people do the right thing. We have this contract, and we're going to enforce things. And if things get out of hand, like they do in Hong Kong, well, we'll enforce them more effectively. So, how does all of that fit in? Spike Lee do the right thing, and Thrasymachus in the Republic saying, well, yeah, unless you can get away with doing the wrong thing, and then anybody would do the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, it makes for why this understanding this rule is important to look at it from just the statement that Kant made. You know what I'm saying? When I first heard this story, I didn't hear the background, what you just told. I heard that, when Max was telling me something about if you had a ring where you could do anything you'd want and you could get away with it. I said, well, now when you first say that, there's one person I would love to strangle and not go to jail for.
Only one?
Well, yeah, at that time. The number's grown a little. But, and then I said to him, but, it kind of bothers me because I know I did it, regardless of whether I would get in trouble. I know I did it. And so I think maybe I don't want the ring because the responsibility is too great for me to know I would be making the right decisions. Let's say nothing that, violent or anything. Or maybe I'd be making decisions for other people because I could do that too. If they were having a problem, they wanted something, I could get it for them. Maybe that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I'd have to be weighing all of this. And it's got too much power for me to have. And that's how I looked at it the first time.
I had a private communication people from Mario telling me that I'm watching my screen here, and he emailed me while you were speaking, Elaine, and he said he does, in fact, have the ring.
Who did that?
Mario.
Who said that?
Mario admits that he has the ring.
Oh.
So, what are you going to do with it, Mario? What's the deal?
Well, let's talk about it, because maybe we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
so,
Mario, let us help you decide since you have the ring.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when's the last time you used it? We're curious now.
Well, I think the story is very complex on many fronts. If you notice, the person who gets the ring is a shepherd. And supposedly shepherds are good people, nice. And then he does the wrong thing when he has the power to do so. Mm-hmm. He cannot resist to temptation. Now, the view in this story of Gyges is very pessimistic about human nature.
Yes.
There is nothing in us which tells us that when we have power can deter us. There is no conscience. There's no guilt. I will go and do it. And that said, if you claim that, then implicitly you understand human nature in a particular way. Implicitly, you already have a view of the human person. And that may be compatible with ethical egoism, with ethical power, Thomas Hobbes. And so, but the question is that the view of the human person which is implicit in the golden rule? I mean, if I have the ring today and I have the power to go and steal whatever I can want and get away with that, I don't think I will be doing that. Not because there is a structure in place to deter me from doing that police force, just because there is a something that deep down in my heart is a conscience there.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, it seems that we are comparing and contrasting, or Plato somehow is provoking, probably through his story, a view of the human person who seems not to be deterred by anything other than power. And if that's the case, everyone is the same. And the only thing we need is structure. And the only thing we need a constitution to deter people from stealing. Virtue has no power here. I think that's the first reaction that I always have with this story.
And the person who had the ring, I see you're into denying that you have it, but the person who does have the ring would be neither prudent, nor temperate, nor courageous, nor just.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
And because that person would lack all of the cardinal virtues, that person would not be a happy person.
Right. That's the cluster of virtue, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is the reason why talking about these ideas brings out a lot of what we never thought about before. It never entered our mind, And that's what I like about when people start talking, what would you do in that case? Well, if I could get away with it, it's not such a big deal, and I need the money. We don't have a lot of things. Sometimes we don't have enough to eat, so what's wrong with that?
There is a story I can add to this, which is a contemporary story that I was told by a student of mine quite a while ago when we were discussing ethical dilemmas about knowing the right thing. And he said, imagine what happened to Enron. Enron was this corporation who filed for bankruptcy, and then I think ultimately the chairman of the board committed suicide. But anyhow, a lot of corruption in the 2005 or 4, I don't remember exactly, in Texas. And he told me that at the entrance of the headquarters in Enron, there was a moral code of the corporation. So a big picture with certain kind of commandment of the moral code. Of course, those principles stated in that moral code were very high.
Was what?
Very, very high in moral quality. So you need to be responsible, you need to be trustworthy, and so on. So every employee that got into that building every day could at least read some of these principles, and including people at the top ladder of that corporation. But that did not prevent that corporation to commit those crimes that later were accused and then filed for bankruptcy, and the business, I think, almost disappeared. Mm-hmm. In other words, in that sense, they were not able to resist to temptation, even though they may have known those principles, let's call virtue, written in this moral code.
So they did the right thing, they didn't do the right thing, and they especially didn't do the right thing if they were at the top of the corporation. And as a result, the corporation fell apart, and it seems like the head officer committed suicide, but maybe the head officer said, I wouldn't have to do this if I could have just figured out a way to get away with it, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, power is I don't want to call it an aphrodisiac, but, you can see that what it does to people, because it's, well, I remember one time at a luncheon, Adler probably killed me, but I used to have a lot of fun with him. And everybody wanted to know what he would take of fame, money, and power. What would he take? So, because I knew him well, and, we drive in the car together, and I'd bring him to seminars, he and I didn't talk a lot about philosophy. We talked about other movies. He loved movies. He loved food, and all that. Once in a while, we would. And so they said, well, do you think you could ask him? And I said, sure, So he was eating his favorite sundae, and I walked over to him, and I said, just want to ask you a real short question. What would you do? What would you pick of these three? Fame, money, or power? And he looked at me and he said, always take power.
That's not very edifying.
Well, in terms of, fame, we figured no. But some people do feel that they can be in a powerful position and can dictate to other people and be an example. But something happens to these people when they are in charge of everybody, and they can tell everybody what to do. If you don't have a moral code, a strong one, you're not going to make it. You're going to leave. I've seen senators who I have known to be very honorable people, and I thought, he's not going to last in Congress more than a year. He can't. And he left. And now he talks on all, the Fox station a lot. He's a great prosecutor, but he couldn't stand it in there because nothing was based on anything that he respected.
Now, let me shift gears a little bit here, a little bit. We began by wondering if the principle of the Golden Rule said enough. Looks like Adler said it's actually vacuous, empty. So we move ahead, and we're getting pretty close to the end of our hour, although we can always go a little over. We move ahead, and now we're talking about the cardinal virtues, and saying that without the cardinal virtues, you're not going to be happy. And even Gyges, who thought that his ship came in, sooner or later he's not going to be happy, and the power is going to lead to destruction. But suppose somebody says, look, if you want everybody to have the cardinal virtues, or even if you want anybody to have all the cardinal virtues, you want everybody, you yourself want to be prudent and temperate and courageous and just, well, that's too much. And that we do well enough if we can find somebody who has one of these virtues, that would be great. And let's assign some virtues to this group, and let's look for somebody who has let's look for somebody who is bold and courageous. Let's look for somebody who's tough enough and bold enough to get China, this humongous country, charted in a direction and keep it going in that direction. How about President Xi? Or somebody might say, we had someone on the show just a short time ago who said that personally he found Trump repulsive, but he's strong and he's going to get some important things done. And yet, if we talk about the cardinal virtues, it's the position of Plato and Aristotle that you really can't have even one of them any more than you have all the rest. You have to take the whole package deal. And so Thomas Aquinas is very clear on this. He says, there's ultimately a unity of the virtues, and if you say, well, we need a strong, bold person at the top, and we'll ignore the other stuff. Sorry, that's not going to work.
Wait, what did Aquinas say? Can you say it again?
He says, unless you have all of the cardinal virtues, you won't have any of them. We sometimes say, for example, well, he had a rotten personal life, but Picasso had a genius artist, and that switch over to other areas of life, and we say that, Churchill in a lot of ways was a real SOB, and he did authorize bombing of civilian centers, but you needed a tough old bastard like him to get you through World War II. He was courageous. And now somebody might say, well, look, the Golden Rule doesn't have enough content, but if you want to live the life of the cardinal virtues, that's asking for too much. They split, they fragment, and we ought to be satisfied if we can get a strong leader who has, say, one of these virtues. So Kennedy was, an adulterer, but, was he a politician? He could really govern. So what's the deal? Do we need all the cardinal virtues in order to have one? And is that too much to ask, to have all the cardinal virtues?
Well, I don't think they're ends in themselves. They're habits. You have to form. If you don't know a good habit, what it is, then why would you even try to form it? It's not a complete picture. You're never completely anything. You're working. If you don't have right habits and right desires, then you won't have any of them. If you've never thought about it,
All right.
You know what
I think you're coming down on the side that you got to hit all the virtues. But Mario and Christopher, what do you say?
Yeah, I think you have to have all of them. But I don't mean in the finished picture. I don't mean, I am just all the time. I think of them that way.
You're not just, it'll turn out you're not courageous, but you're going to have one of them only if you have the others.
No, maybe most of the time I am, but maybe something, you make a mistake. But if you don't even build up a habit, it's like eating. If you don't build up a habit of not eating sugar, and you may slip a few times, but pretty much you just stay away from that kind of food. There's a reason for that. Why would you form a habit?
Let's get Mario and Christopher in on this unity of virtues and whether it's too much to ask for.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I think it's true. I mean, I can't see how a courageous man can be really courageous if he's not temperate, because it all has to do with the governing of oneself. I mean, the courageous man has to govern himself, so he neither is rash nor he's cowardly. And if he can't govern himself in food, he might have something of, I guess the distinction like Thomas makes is between, I believe Aristotle does as well, in having a habit, the habit of virtue, which would include all virtue, and being continent, right? The sugar example is an example of somebody who's maybe continent, falls a few times, but yet pretty much controls him or herself, right? But the virtuous man wouldn't have that struggle. But if you look at something like temperance and compare it with courage, or you look at temperance in terms of justice, you can like in terms of generosity, you can go to an extreme of generosity when you're dealing with other people. And there's a kind of self-restraint that is found in temperance, which must also be found in all the other virtues. But if you don't have it in one, it seems it's unclear to me that you could have it in the others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree.
And perhaps we can add to this, not only that we can make distinction between virtue, but cannot separate them. Where you have one, you have all. And then you have not only the cardinal virtue, it's particularly important prudence. And so choosing the right means for a particular reason. But nevertheless, if we combine these to the idea of happiness, or the end of life as happiness, at least as Adler read Aristotle, we see that these virtues are not sufficient. They are the necessary condition, but they are not sufficient for happiness. Happiness requires other ingredients along the way in a life of a human being. And so, ingredients like material goods, friendship, and even luck. So, and I think in that sense, happiness is a more broader term, eudaimonia, than strictly the moral conditions. So yes, they are a necessary condition, but not sufficient. And I think to reflect upon that regarding the ultimate end, I think it's important.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of the hour, and we always close with the gospel from the liturgy of the day. And this is fairly short. It's from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. Even so, on the outside, you appear righteous, but inside you are filled with hypocrisy and evil doing. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the memorials of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have joined them in shedding the prophets' blood. Thus you bear witness against yourselves that you are the children of those who murdered the prophets. Now fill up what your ancestors measured out." The Gospel of the Lord. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.